So this is going to be a relatively short video for a short lesson, but it's an important lesson, and it's about scope. Now, scope is a description uh, of where a variable is invoked and its range of effects. How I like to think of it. The book describes it saying the scope of a variable is the part of the program where the variable may be accessed by its name. Um, so there are two general rules you need to remember, and it's that one, you know, a local variable scopes begins where the variable is declared. So, say, in going back to the arithmetic program that we made earlier, this is where these variables are declared. Anytime before, say there were there's more code before this. Anytime before this variable declaration, these variables don't exist. Um, and so, and that's important to know. Also, uh, these variables scope ends at the end of this method, and so these variables are what we call local variables, and there are two type of variables. You have local variables and global variables. We'll talk about global variables more when we get into dealing with classes and functions and what have you. So, but for now, these local variables are its scope starts where it's declared and ends at the end of the method that it's declared in. All right. And the second rule is you have to remember that local variables cannot be declared twice. So that's what that means is if I put in, we have num1, num2, num3, num4 all declared here. We can't redeclare, double. Let's copy this. You can't redeclare these variables again. Will throw up an error. And as you can see here, it will, if we try to run this, it will have a compilation error. So let's undo that. And also let's go ahead and show an example of us trying to say call num3 will be equal to num2 plus num1, and say we also try to set these numbers equal to something. And say num2 is equal to 9. It won't work for several reasons, and that's primarily because this declaration statement is before the scope of the variable. So all these concepts seem relatively seem common sense, right? But at the same time, these are very important, especially when you start working with classes and when you're trying to create your own class and invoke local variables. You have to remember their scope. So this will help you when we get more into module 5. And something you can't always rely on is your compiler, particularly IntelliJ, throwing up errors telling you, hey, you didn't, this variable is out of scope. Well, it works in some instances. Some instances, way more complex code, the compiler doesn't necessarily know what you're trying to do and won't throw up an error. Most times it will, sometimes it won't. So you have to remember the scope of your variables within your method, particularly your main method, or different classes you're importing in and using.